You are now listening to the Youth Fusion Radio Hour. Hi guys, welcome back to the third episode of our podcast. Just a reminder for our new fans here that the Youth Fusion Radio Hour is a podcast about leadership and healthy living and is actually hosted by Brittany, Annie, Natalie, Gabby, myself, Marie, and our new secret host.
Mm-hmm. We actually cover sometimes our other domains of Youth Fusion. So myself, I mentioned a few weeks before, and a few others worked in the environmental design domain, where we brought in environmental topics into the classrooms in the communities we worked in.
Exactly. That is why today we want to discuss this preoccupation that is very close to our hearts, that is the environment. I think we all see changes because of climate change, and today's pandemic is just a sign that we have to be aware and act. Recently, it was shown that we're going to live through the hottest year since I don't even know when. And I thought, 2 summers ago? It was 42 degrees in the shades in Paris. And I thought that was the hottest summer ever, but apparently not. It's going to be this summer. And even though there was a drop in our carbon emissions in the past months, it's not going to change anything. We are all going to sweat hard. Just like penguins in Antarctica that are taking mud baths right now. We all know who's actually responsible for global warming, which is Western societies, and who is paying the price, like Indigenous people, people of colors. Anyway, it's a very heated topic, if I might say, pardon my pun. But not everything is lost, and nowadays, more and more youth are taking a stand to remind the good old men that are governing us that they're leaving us with nothing. What we want to change, you might have heard about them, like Autumn Peltier or Greta Thunberg. Before starting with this very serious topic, yes, we're being very serious again. Annie, could you tell us what were your 2 truths and a lie?
Yay! 10 points for my guess on Princess Macadamia Nut. Hopefully. Anyways, on to Annie's actual answers.
Yeah, Brittany, I will give you your 10 points. You were right about our beloved family dog, PMN, or Princess Maca, or Macaroni, or Macarena. She has many, many names, but her full royal title is Princess Macadamia Nut. So as for the other 2 statements, I love fair rides that spin, and I've seen a flying squirrel in the wild. Anybody who has been to an amusement park with me will know that fair rides that spin are one of my least favorite things on this earth. Blah, blah. So that was a lie. But I have seen a flying squirrel in the wild before, which I think is super cool because they are rarely seen, and it was adorable, and I wanted to be its best friend, but it didn't really want to hang out with me.
I think the fair part was also my guess. I don't know why I could just not picture you in a pendulum ride at La Ronde in Montreal. Anyway, we are the funny bunch in the Youth Fusion team. New coordinator have asked to join the podcast family. Maybe we should find a funny name, like the P family, or maybe not. Anyway, you've heard her voice.
You could be the funny bunch. I like the funny bunch.
Marie, P for podcast. I like this because P can stand for a lot of different things. My sense of humor hasn't really evolved since I was 5 years old, so maybe we don't need to go down this road. But hi, everybody. My name is Sophie. I was working in Umiak in Nunavik as a leadership and media coordinator, and now I'm coming to you live from a hill in the woods close to Ottawa. It is admittedly my mom's house, but it's okay. We're working it out. Okay, so 2 truths and a lie. I am a huge sleep talker since I was 5 years old. You can ask anyone in my family whenever you meet them. Super embarrassing.
I guess that's true.
Okay, maybe I'm trying to plant some false, you never know. My favorite vegetable is the eggplant, and I can only do 5 push-ups.
I think that one's wrong. I think you can definitely do more than 5 push-ups.
You really think so?
Yeah.
You'll find out.
But yeah, of course, P was for podcast and nothing else. Also 5 years old here. And so because we decided to keep things light, We present a movie we watched on Netflix Party. Maybe you've heard of it. And it's called There Is Something in the Water, and it was directed by a Canadian actress, Ellen Page, made in 2019. Basically, Ellen Page is presenting a link that none of the official of Nova Scotia want us make between a high rate of cancer in a rural community of Nova Scotia and the dumping of residue by a large corporation in local water and wells. It's a tale as old as time. A lot of Indigenous population and peoples of colors are suffering from this in Canada and in the United States, because they usually live in poorer area and have less fighting power.
So Ellen Page exposes the issue to a larger audience, as the few people she interviews actually notice the link in their own communities. So that'd be between the cancer in the communities and the polluted water. But those people, because they are, not celebrities, they were kind of ignored by their government. So it's nice because as a public figure, she was able to get their voices and stories heard to a larger audience, which is like everyone who watches Netflix, right? Such as the five of us. She covers 2 areas in Nova Scotia, a Black community outside of Shelbourne, I think I'm saying that right, and Boat Harbor and the Mi'kmaq tribal lands. This documentary is actually based off a book with the same title, which was written by Canadian social scientist Ingrid R.G. Waldron, who actually is also interviewed in the movie.
So, for those who do not know about my awesomeness, I'm Nova Scotian, which I think is awesome. But I've also been a witness to a lot of these environmental wrongdoings, like Boat Harbor, which I'm going to give you guys a mini lesson on today because I want to talk about it later. I feel like the documentary did like a really fantastic portrayal of Boat Harbor. I live right now in my house, my parents' house, 10 minutes away from Boat Harbor. So like I grew up with the pollution and the smokestacks and the awful smell. So if you don't know the history of Boat Harbor, have no fear. I'm going to give you a mini lesson. I just have to put on my Smarticle history specs. The history of Boat Harbor is in 1965, the Pictou Landing First Nation, which is Mi'kmaq, was told that the impact would be minimal and was persuaded to accept $60,000 for the loss of their rights to the land called Boat Harbor. This was a lie, as the pollution from the pulp mill, which is a paper making mill, has affected many people's health as well as like killed the fish. So this was proven, and one of the Pictou Landing chiefs filed a lawsuit against the government in 1986. Flash forward many decades to part 2 of this history lesson. There has been many years in and out of court with settlements and inquiries. In 2014, it was discovered that the pipeline was leaking untreated effluent, which is really harmful waste factory, into the Pictou First Nations, but it was also like leaking into their like sacred burial grounds, which was like huge uproar. And so there was a lot of political debate and protests with that. So many awesome political protests were done by the Mi'kmaq residents of the Pictou First Nation. And in 2015, with all of their hard work, they forced a bill to get passed that would hold Northern Pulp, which is the paper mill, accountable. And the government deemed that they would have to shut down if they didn't come up with an alternative environmental strategy by January 31st, 2020. So now that everybody's caught up, you're probably thinking, hey, Brittany, isn't it May something, 2020? And shouldn't the decision be made about Boat Harbor? Well, that is the whole point of the mini lesson, the suspense. So stay tuned and I'll update you in part 2.
No, I was just going to say, Brittany, I definitely learned something, and I watched the documentary too. So thank you for the history. It really makes you wonder about what sorts of environmental racism is going on in other provinces, because I'm realizing that like there's probably lots out there that I don't know about, even though there are some issues that are more widely publicized. Like, stay tuned for the release of the Unistoten Camp Invasion documentary, which should be out in 2020, that talks about what's been going on in BC. But I had no idea of like the scale of the environmental racism that was happening. And like Nova Scotia is just an example. And like geographically it's small. So like there's so much space in Canada for, yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like I'm sure there's so many other cases even in Nova Scotia alone that like we're not hearing about. The only reason we're hearing about these ones is because like even though a super intelligent woman has already written a book about them. Ellen Page is using her fame to draw attention to these issues in her home province that otherwise would probably never get the attention of a big media company like Netflix. So like thinking about, there's like so many provinces in this country. There's like, it's crazy how much work it takes to actually give space to these issues on a national level when these are things that we should all be being taught in like geography in grade 9. Like how come we don't know about them? It's a little bit scary to go down that road.
That's such a good point about the book, that like this information was out there, but we're all internalizing it because of a movie. And I was sort of glad, like watching the documentary at the beginning, I was a little bit worried because like there were a lot of moments of like, oh my gosh, you're Ellen Page. But then like, thankfully the documentary was able to move past that. And I think it was a good example of someone using their platform in a way that might help.
Totally. And I was also impressed. I mean, I don't want to give her like too much wow for doing this, but like, I feel like celebrities often pick kind of like arbitrary social causes to get involved with, like, that are kind of like disconnected from their own personal history. So it's cool to see her being like, okay, where am I from and what's going on where I'm from that I can draw attention to, and like going back to her roots in that way, I feel like is a really important part of just like social activism and like environmental, like standing up for your own land.
Oh, by the way, did we tell you that you're listening to the Youth Fusion Radio Hour? If so, now you know.
Today for the mid-podcast game, we have a game that was proposed by our super awesome Annie, and it's called Guess the Sound. So open your ear. We are going to play some sounds, and then we will give you the answer at the end of the podcast so you can try and figure out what's playing. If I was super mean, I would share the sound of like that bird called the white bellbird from Brazil. There is a bunch of bellbirds from around the world, but the Brazilian one is apparently the loudest bird ever. I think that if you like have it next to you here, it's as loud as like a plane taking off. No need to take out your headphones. I have a very regular noise. Here it is.
Here is my sound.
Whoa!
Here's my sound.
These are awesome sounds. These are really tough, you guys. Okay, are we ready for my sound?
Yes.
There we go. Good luck, everybody.
Okay.
Whoa, I was not ready for that sound.
Okay, and the last sound is...
You are listening to the Youth Fusion Radio Hour.
Wow, guys, what interesting noises we've played. I actually am really curious to find out what yours is, Marie. I have a sneaking feeling it might actually be that bird.
So
Anyway,
evil.
on to what we're going to continue to talk about, and now what I'm claiming is part 2 of our podcast. We're going to continue talking about environmental rights because it's awesome. But we're also going to be talking about some youth that have done some really incredible things in the name of environmental rights.
Yeah, I feel like often when we hear people talking about climate change and like how we're killing our planet, the problem seems so huge that it can feel like we as individuals, like as one person, couldn't possibly do anything about it. But there are so many youth across the country and around the world who are doing really amazing work, like speaking up for the protection of their environment and defending their right to live in a healthy community. And so showing us that this isn't true, that like one person actually does have the power to like activate their community or just do small things that make a difference. Marie mentioned a few of them at the beginning of this podcast. Everybody's probably heard of Greta Thunberg, who is amazing, but you don't have to sail across the ocean to make a difference.
So true. There are lots of amazing young people who are making a difference on the ground in Canada too. I found in my research Larissa Crawford's name, and she stood out to me because she took a sort of different approach to environmental activism than what we might picture. Like, I think in my head, when I think about environmental activism, I think about like a lot of protests and like being very like out there working against all of these companies. But what Larissa's been doing is she's been taking anti-racism and Indigenous knowledge, because she's both Jamaican and Métis, and she's been able to apply it to renewable energy projects in Canada. So she started her own company, and her company works with other organizations as they try to make themselves more like climate friendly and equitable. And I thought that was really cool, because instead of like working against companies in Canada, she's basically trying to guide them to make better decisions when they're trying to do their part for the environment, and they might not be totally sure how to.
Yeah, that is really cool. I like her approach.
Wow, it's really crazy to see all these young people take matter in their own hands. Like, I was not that adventurous when I was their age. I was probably playing Pokemon cards or something. And these young adults, they go to the United Nations and tell off all these people. Like, you can find it on YouTube. It's crazy. It's not model UN anymore. Like, I wanted to talk about like a project that's like smaller scale. Like, it's in Nunavik. It was actually brought to our attention by our coworker Olivier in New York. Thank you, Olivier. It's a science of the land camp in Kagix-Tulujuak, George River, and it's called Nunami Sukaijanik, and it's a really awesome community-based project that started in 2016. So youth, community members, elder, researcher, they all work together on Arctic ecology topics and learn from each other. They're studying species, analyzing the water. They're also learning from their elders. And it all started when a mine wanted to open around the community, and like community members decided to do their own environmental assessment before taking a decision. So they made their own it all started because they wanted to make that environmental assessment before taking a decision. They wanted to see how much, like, I don't know, what was around, like, what was the quality of their water? How is it going to impact, like, the number of fish and stuff like that? But the goal of the camp is now it's also to train youth in, well, I'm going to say a big word here, but environmental stewardship, meaning like they could take care of their own environment in the future. And it's really inspiring to see this youth there. They could spend a summer vacation with their friends, going swimming, but instead they're like in the river covered with bugs. And you can tell they really care about the land and traditional way of life and its preservation.
Yeah, I know when I heard about that project from Olivier, I was like, man, I wish I was 15 again so that I could do better, more productive things than like paving driveways, which is something I signed up to do because I thought it would make me mad cash. I didn't last long. It was like the worst job I've ever had. But anyways, there are so many ways of being an environmental activist or just like being engaged in these kinds of projects. It can seriously be anything, like organizing a garbage pickup in your community, or getting your family to reuse the same bags when they go to the grocery stores, or spending more time on the land, like these youth that Marie were talking about were doing, so that you can get to know like how to protect it better and sort of how it's doing. In Inukjuak, there's a bunch of youth working with their community to design and build a greenhouse where they can grow their own food, which is really amazing. I think it's been like a project that's been happening over a few years because it takes time to get the whole community involved. But last winter, I think they built cold frames so they could start growing stuff over the summer, and they already have like fresh tomatoes growing inside through the winter, which makes me so jealous because I think fresh hot tomatoes are like my favorite vegetable after eggplants. So maybe that's giving something away, but I'll say no more.
Going back to youth in Canada and what they've been doing, we actually do have more activist environmentalists than I thought, who are very passionate and successful in spreading the word of environmental protection. So I came upon a young girl from Nova Scotia. Brittany, maybe you've heard of her. So I think she's 15 right now, but she started her work when she was only 11. Going back to Marie's comments of like playing Pokemon cards, I don't know. I would have, okay, just wait till you hear what she actually did. So her name is Stella Bowles, or is it Bowles? I don't know.
Stella, if you're listening, let us know.
Yeah, sorry about that. And so she's actually from Upper La Have, Nova Scotia, where she learned actually at a young age that she's not allowed to swim in the river near her house because it contained a lot of sewage waste. And then I actually watched her TED Talk. So she was also on a TED Talk by the time she was 15. And she spoke about this issue where she said that the river didn't have a little bit of fecal matter, but it had way above the recommendation of a person safely being able to touch it with their skin. So there's like different levels of what kind of water you can touch. So there's the type that they just don't recommend you swimming in it, and then there's the touch where you shouldn't be touching it with your skin. So it was like, I don't even know, like 200 the times or greater of like being unsafe. It's really crazy. I really recommend you guys watching it. So again, going back when she was 11 years old, she scientifically found this truth and publicly displayed her findings, which led to her reaching policymakers from all three levels of government, who jointly pledged $15.7 million to clean up the river. So she kind of spearheaded this large action in Nova Scotia. And then since then, she has won a lot of awards for her work. She travels around the world to meet people who are also interested in cleaning up the environment. And again, she's only in high school. So I think she's a really impressive young girl, and she definitely is an inspiration for myself as an adult.
I mean, so yeah, I don't know Stella, but I definitely know of her story. But there's a lot of rivers and lakes in Nova Scotia that you can't swim in. A lot. I can remember going to the beach in the city in Halifax with my friends last summer, and you couldn't go swimming at that beach because it was contaminated. So I think might be a Nova Scotia thing, or there's a river down by my house that led to it leads to Boat Harbor, filters in, and you can't swim in that river anymore because of the contamination. And it's definitely a Nova Scotia thing, maybe more Canadian thing, but I just feel like Stella's story and looking at the power that the youth have is absolutely incredible. The youth, aka you guys that are listening right now, are the future, and seeing you guys stand up to people in power makes me want to join in and stand up with you guys, because what affects one of us affects us all. That's me quoting Ellen Page at the end of the movie. But that brings me back to what I really want to talk about, and what I'm really passionate about with the environment is Boat Harbor, just because how close I live to it, and that I lived through all of the protests and how it definitely divided my community. But I think it really shows the power that community has, just because of the perseverance of the Mi'kmaq community of the Pictou First Landing, because the mill has been closed since January 31st, 2020. And like I said, as awesome as that is, it wouldn't have been possible without the endless years of protesting and standing up to the people in power by the Mi'kmaq people of the Pictou First Nations. And it wasn't just the adults that went and did protesting, it was the youth, it was everybody in the community, it was people outside of the community, it was a whole bunch of people in Nova Scotia that came and helped put on these protests. So I think it's really powerful to see that perseverance has success. Anyway, so that was my little tidbit with Nova Scotia. But yeah, so with perseverance, you guys can make a change. And I mean, just look at the huge waves that were caused by Greta. Her last name gets me. Thunberg.
Yeah.
Who, with just one act, caused millions around the world to protest with her. You guys have power, and if we believe, we can do anything.
Yeah, and I'm sure we've, like, you guys listening and us too, we've also thought once about the changes that are affecting our communities, and I'm talking to you guys, your community, because of global warming and or environmental racism. For some of you, it would be the changes in the hunting rhythm or the ice being thinner. For others, it would be the rise of cancer in our families. In France, where I come from, it's about 9% of the people that are dying because of pollution. And even right now, with everything that's happening, some people are saying that air pollution is increasing the risk of getting sick and dying of the virus. So it's really time to take action. Before we finish and close the podcast, the moment we've all been waiting for, the game results. So yeah, what were your noises? And I'm going to start. It was not a bird, or it would have been a very weird bird. It was actually my space heater. Like my hot water tank has been broken since I arrived, so there is no heat in the house. It's not really cold right now, but it's really humid, and I hate that. That's why I use like the space heater, because I just miss the good old northern dry air.
Nailed it. Mine was frogs. I went for a walk the other night, and all I could hear the whole time was these frogs that were like actually screaming their brains out. I guess it's warm enough all of a sudden, like just warm enough, that they're all starting to hatch out of their eggs and start like being like, woohoo, we're alive, yay. And it's driving me crazy. Like at first I was like, oh, it's so nice, spring is happening, but now it's actually all you can hear. It almost hurts my ears. I'm like, don't they even know about social distancing? What's going on?
That's so funny, because mine was also frogs. I live across the street from a swamp, and I can hear them every night when I'm about to go to sleep. So when we were recording clips, I was like, I'm going to investigate this. And I went over. But like, the clip is really weird, because at the beginning you're like, that's definitely a frog. But then like other stuff starts happening and you're like, I think these are actually aliens. So it was a really interesting experience for me recording that.
I mean, maybe frogs are actually aliens spying on us.
This is a really good thing we should be considering, actually.
It's possible.
Brittany, thank you for raising that point.
Mine was baby goat noise. Well, mine was goat noises, because I'm slightly obsessed with how cute baby goats are, and I like goats. I want a pet goat, and I think it's really funny that they make sounds like people yelling at other people.
And then mine was more of an action than someone making a noise. It was someone throwing a bottle or a Coke Mentos rocket to the ground. So right, they have like a Coke bottle, they put a Mentos in it, and they threw it. So it's kind of the explosion of it. I've been watching so many of those videos, and I thought it was an interesting, weird noise.
Well, guys, thank you so much for listening to yet another one of our podcasts. Full disclosure, it's officially the third time we've done a podcast. Maybe you can still tell, but we hope you had fun, because we sure did. Keep in tune for the next week's episode of Youth Fusion Radio Hour. We won't tell you what it's about, because we haven't decided yet. But have a great week. Be grateful for all the things. Remember to say I love you to someone, and let us know about your environmental projects. And if you have an idea or something that you want to talk about next, subscribe to our channel and follow us on Facebook at Youth Fusion Indigenous Youth Communities. Thank you, and we out.